أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم هل أتاك حديث الغاشية وجوه يومئذ خاشعة عاملة ناصبة تصلى نارا حامية تسقى من عين آنية ليس لهم طعام إلا من ضريع لا يسمن ولا يغني من جوع. Surah Al-Ghashiyah. It is a Makki surah, just like all of those which are towards the end of the Quran. And like we have mentioned before, the majority of the chapters which are or were revealed in Makkah al-Mukarramah or before migration, before Hijrah, deal with the foundational aspects of Islam. So the core themes of Makki surah, of a Makki surah, will be Tawheed, the oneness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Risalah, the prophethood of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, and the Akhirah, the hereafter. So similarly, this surah, we can possibly split it into two. From هل أتاك حديث الغاشية till وزرابي مبثوثة. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talks about the reality of Jannah and Jahannam, which is part of Akhirah, the third core theme of the Quran. And from أفلا ينظرون إلى الإبل كيف خلقت, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talks about His power, which relates to Tawheed, Allah's unique power. So the surah is more or less split into two. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions, هل أتاك حديث الغاشية, that O Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, has news reached you about the overwhelming event. Ghashiyah has been translated in different ways. It means to envelop, to cover, to overwhelm. The day of judgment is meant here, and the day of judgment is such that the horror and the difficulty of that day will envelop everybody. It will overwhelm everybody. Others have mentioned that it will envelop every single human, the first human who is Adam alayhi salam till the last human. All will come under this field on the day of judgment. Others mention that Ghashiyah here is meant, the meaning is the fire. وَتَغْشَى وُجُوهَهُمُ النَّارِ. There's an ayah that the fire will envelop their faces. So there are different meanings with this Ghashiyah. So to envelop, to overwhelm. هل أتاك حديث الغاشية. So the question is posed by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam to ask and to show everybody that the information you are receiving now, nor did you know this from before, in this amount of detail, with this amount of tafsil, nor did you know, nor did the people nor did the people before you in the Arabian tribes know about this. It's unique. هل أتاك حديث الغاشية. So one is, do you know? And second is, have you told the rest? هل أتاك حديث الغاشية. Then Allah splits from here two types of people. وجوه يومئذ خاشعة, and later on وجوه يومئذ ناعمة. These surahs are very important. Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam mentions, narrated by Nu'man ibn Bashir radiyallahu ta'ala anhu, that Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam used to recite Suratul A'la, meaning the one before, Sabbih isma rabbika al-a'la, and Hal Ataka on the day of Jumu'ah and on the day of Eid. So generally, if you are around our masajid, you will realize that even though the imams read different things, these surahs are rotated around. So you will hear very often in Jumu'ah, سَبِّحِ اسْمَ رَبِّكَ الْأَعْلَى and هَلْ أَتَاكَ حَدِيثُ الْغَاشِيَةِ. And also on the day of Eid, one of the pairings that Rasulullah ﷺ would read were these two. So if you hear these in the Jumu'ah Salah or the Eid Salah, then this is the Sunnah of Rasulullah ﷺ. The question is, before we get back to وُجُوهٍ يَوْمَئِذٍ خَاشِعَةٍ, is there are certain surah and chapters which there is encouragement to recite in the deen of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So for example, سَبِّحِ اسْمَ هَلْ أَتَاكَ. سَبِّحِ اسْمَ also in the witr. In the first rakat, Rasulullah ﷺ used to recite سَبِّحِ اسْمَ رَبِّكَ الْأَعْلَى. Second rakat, قُلْ يَا أَيُّهَا الْكَافِرُونَ. Third, قُلْ هُوَ اللَّهُ أَحَدٌ. Similarly, in the Maghrib Sunnah, meaning the two after the Fard, Rasulullah ﷺ used to recite قُلْ يَا أَيُّهَا الْكَافِرُونَ in the first, قُلْ هُوَ اللَّهُ أَحَدٌ in the second. Similarly, in the Fajr Sunnah, Nabi ﷺ used to recite قُلْ يَا أَيُّهَا الْكَافِرُونَ, second rakat, قُلْ هُوَ اللَّهُ أَحَدٌ. When a person makes tawaf and they read behind the Maqam Ibrahim, the two nafil, again the same surah were recited. And then every morning or evening we are told to recite Surah Yasin, Tabarak, Alif Lam Mim Sajda. So the purpose behind reciting this surah, besides the reward, meaning a person will be saved from questioning in the grave, etc., etc. But one is to ponder that we recite it every day, but let's ponder over the meaning. Why do we recite this every day? What message does this surah entail? What's inside it? That if I recite it every day, I will become such a person who will be free and saved from the punishment of the qabr. So if we internalize the messages in this surah, which are supposed to be recited daily, then we will understand why the virtue is there. Example, قُلْ يَا أَيُّهَا الْكَافِرُونَ قُلْ هُوَ اللَّهُ أَحَدٌ, is to negate any partners to Allah and then to affirm Tawheed, the two surah. So naturally a person who does this will die upon Iman. A person who recites a surah every day and also ponders over them, then naturally a person will be free from hypocrisy, etc. We have to understand why are we reciting this surah. Many people, mashallah, they recite. Some people don't. Mashallah, people recite Tabarak every night, Alif Lam Mim Sajda every night, etc. But we don't really go and ponder over the meaning. What message is Allah asking me to recite and remind myself of every single day, every single night, every single morning? Then the surah will impact the heart when we ponder over them. Not just merely after Maghrib, Tabarak alladhi biyadihi al-mulku wa ala kulli shay'in qadir, and we recite quickly. No, but if we ponder over the verses, the meaning, what the ulama have written about the verse, and we internalize this surah, we will enjoy reading it more, it will not be a burden, and we will actually gain the qualities which will now allow us to be such that we can now gain this virtue of being freed from the etc., etc. So Rasulullah ﷺ mentioned under this, هَلْ أَتَاكَ حَدِيثُ الْغَاشِيَةِ وُجُوهٌ يَوْمَئِذٍ خَاشِعَةٌ. Faces on that day, or faces on this day will be humiliated. Khashia has different meanings. Sometimes it means humble. Sometimes it can mean humiliated. So here, وُجُوهٌ يَوْمَئِذٍ خَاشِعَةٌ, faces on this day, meaning the day of judgment, will be humiliated. Rasulullah ﷺ has mentioned, and also Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has mentioned in Surah Abbas, similar verses. وُجُوهٌ يَوْمَئِذٍ مُسْفِرَةٌ ضَاحِكَةٌ مُسْتَبْشِرَةٌ وَوُجُوهٌ يَوْمَئِذٍ عَلَيْهَا غَبَرَةٌ تَرْهَقُهَا قَتَرَةٌ. Similar, talking about the faces on the day of judgment. And then also in Surah Al-Qiyamah, similar has been mentioned. وُجُوهٌ يَوْمَئِذٍ نَاظِرَةٌ إِلَى رَبِّهَا نَاظِرَةٌ وَوُجُوهٌ يَوْمَئِذٍ بَاسِرَةٌ تَظُنُّ أَن يُفْعَلَ بِهَا فَاقِرَةٌ. The theme occurs in a few surah, a few chapters. So وُجُوهٌ يَوْمَئِذٍ خَاشِعَةٌ, faces on this day will be humiliated, disgraced. عَامِلَةٌ نَاصِبَةٌ. Amil is a person who works, a person who toils. Nasiba, exhausted. Meaning there will be people and these faces will be those which worked, which toiled, and they will be exhausted. You can see, now Isha is very late, so you can see everyone's faces, you can see that they are tired. The face, you don't have to look at anything else, you can just see by the face, the person's exhausted. So وجوه يومئذ ناعمة خاشعة وجوه يومئذ خاشعة عاملة ناصبة تصلى نارا حامية. They will enter the scorching fire. They will be made to enter the scorching fire. Such a fire which is at its peak. It was boiled and burnt and it is blazing to its ultimate degree, hamiyah. Such a fire, not like the fire of this world where if we light a fire, and we had a barbecue a few weeks ago, and then what happens to the fire? It's weak in the beginning, it gets stronger, and then after a while it goes weak again, isn't it? But the fire of Jahannam only grows stronger. تَصْلَى نَارًا حَامِيَةً. Umar radiallahu ta'ala anhu, he was traveling through Syria when he was Amirul Mu'mineen, and he met a Christian monk. And he looked at him and he was exhausted out of worship. Meaning the Christian monk was tired out of diligence, meaning out of worship, worshipping who he believes to be God. Umar radiallahu ta'ala saw him and began crying. He began crying. So the people asked, "O Amirul Mu'mineen, why are you crying for?" He said, "Amilatun nasiba." Because this individual didn't believe in the true God, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but something which he imagined, or false beliefs which were narrated to him. Despite him worshipping who he thought was God, it will not be rewarded. So all his effort and his toil and his exhaustion, there is no benefit. And that is why I am crying. عاملة ناصبة تصلى نارا حامية تسقى من عين آنية. He will be forced, made to drink from a boiling spring. He will be forced and made to drink from a boiling spring. ليس لهم طعام إلا من ضريع. So first Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions the drink of this individual. That he will drink min aynin aniyah, a boiling spring, boiling water. Tusqa min aynin aniyah. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions in other surah also the types of boiling drinks that will be given to the inmates of Jahannam. It is mentioned in many surah. So here it's mentioned water of a boiling spring. Wujuhi. Then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions لَيْسَ لَهُمْ طَعَامٌ إِلَّا مِنْ ضَرِيعٍ. So first the drink. It will be of a boiling spring, boiling hot water. Then the food. That they will have no food except ضَرِيع. Now what is ضَرِيع? Ulama eventually come down to, it was a poisonous, dry, thorny plant. A poisonous, dry, thorny plant. It is mentioned that Quraysh used to call it shabraq. Sometimes ulama mentioned in one season it was called something and in another season it took a different name. But dari' was a thorny plant which was dry and poisonous. And that is what they will be given for food. So one is the punishment being given to them. On top of the punishment, the food they will be given will be a thorny plant. Meaning it doesn't even go down the throat nicely. It's not palatable. On top of that, when they will need something to drink, so if we have food and it's not going down, then we need a drink, isn't it? We need some water to take the food down. And then they will ask for water. They will ask for drink. And then instead of being given nice sweet water, cold water, they will be given boiling hot water. So there is only punishment upon punishment in Jahannam. It is a place of Allah's wrath. A place where it is a manifestation of Allah's anger. So naturally it will be a very fierce punishment. So وجوه يومئذ خاشعة عاملة ناصبة تصلى نارا حامية تسقى من عين آنية ليس لهم طعام إلا من ضريع لا يسمن ولا يغني من جوع. Now these few verses we've done, going back to the earlier message. Every time we recited this verse, or we listened to it at least once a week, if the Imam recites in the Jumu'ah Salah, and we pondered over this meaning, then how much conviction would we have on the Akhirah? How much easier would it be for us to say no to the forbidden? How much easier would it be for us to act upon the good? Because we don't ponder over the verses, and we don't learn Arabic also, then we create a block between ourselves and the reminder of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The Quran is not just to recite, it is to ponder over. أَفَلَا يَتَدَبَّرُونَ الْقُرْآنِ أَفَلَا يَتَدَبَّرُونَ الْقُرْآنِ. But most of us are happy with just reading a little and then carrying on with life. Like a wazifa or awrad, we just read and then move on. However, that's why there is an obstacle between us and conviction entering our hearts. And if every day we understood a little Arabic, or even we sat in a few lessons, then we would understand, okay, this is the theme of the surah, at least we'll understand. And then when this is recited, we'll understand, okay, this is Jahannam, Allah is mentioning this, Allah is mentioning that, and it will impact our daily life. But as long as we just do that mere recitation, we will accumulate reward, and nur will possibly descend in our hearts. But the impact on our hearts will be less. So just like the way of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does not mention punishment only. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala brings mention of His punishment, then will always bring punishment of His reward. Even in His qualities and sifat, if Allah talks about His wrath and anger, then He will bring ayat and verses about His mercy. Because al-imanu bayn al-khawfi wal-raja, that a mu'min is always between fear and hope. Hope that Allah will forgive, and fear that maybe because of my actions I might be forgiven. Always between the two. So when the ayat are coupled of punishment and reward, then this should be our state. Then Allah mentions, we'll just mention it quickly, we won't go into detail this week. وُجُوهُ يَوْمَئِذٍ نَاعِمَةٍ. The opposite. That faces on this day will be in bliss, will be in joy. لِسَعْيِهَا رَاضِيَةٍ. They will be pleased with their efforts. On the top, what came? خَاشِعَةٍ, humiliated. عَامِلَةٌ نَاصِبَةٌ, exhausted. Imagine a person goes work. And they toil, and then at the end there is no wage. There's no wage, there's no benefit. That is a person who believes in Allah, but not the way he was supposed to be believed in, and then tries to worship also. He will come on the day of judgment expecting pay, expecting reward, and there will be nothing for him. Now imagine how tired he will be, how disappointed he will look. On the other hand, a person who believes in Allah correctly, His names and His attributes, وُجُوهُ يَوْمَئِذٍ نَاعِمَةٍ, he will be full of joy, in bliss. لِسَعْيِهَا رَاضِيَةٍ. All the effort he sent forward, he is going to be rewarded. لِسَعْيِهَا رَاضِيَةٍ. So he will be very happy with what he has sent forth, the effort he made in this world. فِي جَنَّةٍ عَالِيَةٍ. In a lofty Jannah, in the high stages of Jannah. في جنة عالية لا تسمع فيها لاغية. One benefit of Jannah is a person will not have to listen to any cumbersome talk, useless talk. لا تسمع فيها لاغية فيها عين جارية. In the ayah before, what came? That they will have boiling hot water to drink from a boiling spring. Here فيها عين جارية. There are flowing springs which a person will be able to drink from. Different types of springs which are mentioned in Surah Muhammad. فِيهَا عَيْنٌ جَارِيَةٌ فِيهَا سُرُرٌ مَرْفُوعَةٌ. They will have raised couches. وَأَكْوَابٌ مَوْضُوعَةٌ. And placed cups and goblets. وَنَمَارِقُ مَصْفُوفَةٌ. And lined pillows. وَزَرَابِيُّ مَبَثُوثَةٌ. And carpets which are spread out. So Allah gives us an image of those people who will be punished in Jahannam. And then those people who will be blessed with the bounties of Jannah. And it is up to us now to compare and think, okay, which way shall I go? Which way shall I go? Shall I be such who believes in Allah in the correct manner? It's important. To believe in Allah is one thing, to believe in Allah in the correct manner, with the correct aqeedah, with the correct belief, and then work towards his obedience, refraining from his disobedience. Or be from that person who toils hard in worship of a God, but not Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Not Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And sometimes we think to ourselves, we don't worship idols. We think that, we don't worship idols. I worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But the idols of today are different than the idols of yesterday. Today our idols are different. Whatever we dedicate most of our 24-hour day to, that is our idol. Whatever distracts us from the obedience of Allah, that is our idol that we need to worry about. That I should not dedicate so much time towards an idol which will not benefit me on the Day of Judgment. Sometimes we disassociate ourselves from idol worship, etc., because we never worshipped idols. Most of us were born Muslims. However, what is the idol of today? What is my idol personally? What distracts me from Allah and His remembrance and His obedience? What makes me disobey Allah? Then that is the idol we need to worry about. That I'm putting so much time in this. Amilatun nasibah, that on the Day of Judgment I will be humiliated. That is the message for us. Otherwise we disassociate ourselves. I never bow down to an idol. I think it's foolish. But what is our idol of today? And everybody might have a different one. Some people obsessed over football. Obsessed so much they don't perform salah, etc. So that is your idol you need to worry about. Maybe some people will be a different sport, cricket. Some people will just be TV and shows, etc. Games. So whatever is your idol, whatever makes you disobey Allah, that's the important part. Whatever makes you neglectful of Allah, neglectful of the akhirah, that is what we need to remove from our lives, at least as much that it does not lead us to the disobedience of Allah, make us neglect our salah, makes it hard for us to stay in the obedience of Allah, then that we have to worry about. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give us all the tawfiq to ponder over these verses and make a goal of our life to understand the verses at least on a surface level. At least on a surface level, so that our hearts can be impacted by the verses of the Quran.